What now stops Boatsy versus Yarde?
Anthony Yarde is a free agent, never ducked, dodged or avoided any fighter.
Joshua Boatsy's told me he wants to fight Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde, I know, wants to fight Joshua Boatsy.
I am fully qualified to say my fighter wants to fight.
You
agree. Are not qualified.
Just speak to Joshua because I know that he wants to fight.
No.
Whatever goes into an athlete's body, however it gets there, it is the responsibility of the athlete.
Absolutely has to be Conor Benn and Chris Eubank in the first quarter of 2025.
Anthony Joshua, he talked constantly about wanting to be a three-time heavyweight champion of the world. Somewhere along the line, he's going to have to fight a live one.
AJ found boxing. Daniel was born into boxing. Tyson should pull a sickie against Usyk and let's just make the fight.
It's the fight we want to see, isn't it?
Welcome to episode 95 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan. I've managed to rid myself of that barnacle, Spencer Oliver, who's haunting people in Texas. But I've got the inimitable voice of boxing, Adam Smith. Adam, nice to see you.
Lovely to see you.
And we're also joined today by one of the game's best promoters, Tunde, one of best trainers, Tunde Ajayi. Nice to see you, Tunde. Welcome to the show.
I can be a promoter if you want me to.
Well, it's a lucrative profession to be in. Those boys are all pals now, aren't they?
It seems like that's the place.
Listen, let's start with one of the big pieces of news that happened last week, which is the situation surrounding Conor Benn. It's a seemingly a staple diet of this show. I think we mentioned it on the first show that we ever talked about, which was when it all blew up a couple of years ago. And here we are on episode 95 talking about the same subject matter. What was your reaction to the news that came out last week? A proclamation from Conor that he's been cleared and that he is likely to find himself back in a ring pretty soon. What was your takeaway from what you've heard and what you've seen and what's been said?
What I've heard and what I've seen and what I've said over 2 years now has been confusing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key word. I think no one really sort of knows where we are. The British board have got to make their statement. They've said that they are considering things, UCAD as well. Conor Benn seems to be happy to fight free. He has fought, we know, in America. We know he's closing in on the big Chris Eubank fight, which presumably will happen in Saudi in the early part of next year. So in a way, I'm really pleased that Conor Benn has sort of got things behind him and can move on with his career. But at the same time, I'm not completely happy with the fact that everyone doesn't seem to be in union with it. They don't seem to be united. We seem still to have a little bit of grey area here. I think the key is that everybody either agrees that Conor Benn is fine, he can fight here, we move on, and everything goes behind him. Maybe he should have come out and said, hey, look, something's in me. I don't know how it got there, but I've got to take responsibility for what goes in my body.
Because I don't know where you are, Tunde, as a trainer of athletes. Where are you on the view of strict liability? Because that's the thing that constantly gets reverberated around, which is ultimately whatever goes into an athlete's body, however it gets there, it is the responsibility of the athlete, whether it's in boxing, whether it's in tennis, whether it's in cricket, whether it's in athletics, whatever sport it's in, the liability lies with the athlete. We've seen it recently in tennis with Yannick Sinner, the number one tennis player, being able to account for a product getting into his system that was came in through a masseuse. But where are you on the notion of strict liability?
And that's what I said, that if we'd known that at the beginning, if he'd said that at the beginning, then we wouldn't be where we are now, I don't think.
Well, I think, you know, boxers at this level have teams. Yep. So you cannot really hold the boxer 100% liable if he's being advised by a team. Now, this is what me and you were speaking about this in the beginning. An athlete is responsible for what he puts in his body, but if he's been given these
by a big team,
big team, then you can't actually put all blame on him. I don't know what Conor's actually said, whether he's admitted that it's what he put, or was he advised? Does he have a nutritionist?
He's denied emphatically from the get-go. And the interesting thing is do you think he's cleared? Because I'm not sure he has been cleared. I think that ultimately what they've gotten out from underneath with is a technicality, and we'll hear from Robert Smith in a minute. But I've always maintained that there's only one test that's ever been debated. The VADA clean boxing test is the one that the WBC wanted to deal with because it was their clean boxing test that they wanted to identify and look at. Conor alluded to contamination in this so-called 270-page report that no one's ever seen besides the WBC. The WBC ruled out contamination instantaneously, then came back with the idea on behalf of Conor that you may have got this from eggs, Then the argument then raged about, well, where could these eggs have come from? Because chromoform isn't present in eggs in the UK.
Yep.
Conor himself said it's got nothing to do with eggs. I didn't take this substance. I haven't got this substance in my system. It's such a small amount that it can't be relatable to anything I've done. So it really isn't right, and these tests are flawed. And yet the argument has always been jurisdiction. UKAD, as the governing body of anti-doping in this country, have been trumped by jurisdiction, which is these Avada tests.
Yep.
And that's the argument.
There's a lot of smoke and mirrors here going on, and I think that, having known Conor since he was a kid, he was the last person I thought would have touched drugs. I've got to be honest, that when it happened, I was like, no way, right? But it did happen, and I think the athlete is responsible for what goes in his body. So ultimately, I just want this whole mess moved behind us. I want to get on with it.
Can I just insert? I hear what you're saying, but why should he admit guilt for something he says he hasn't done?
No, I agree with that. I think if he hasn't done it, if he believes... But then there's the team thing.
I say that because, you know, I spoke to Conor last year sometimes, and he looked me dead in the eye, and I'm a good reader of energy.
Same with me.
And same with you. And, you know, he said to me, there's no way I would do this. So I'm kind of baffled that, you know... But it's in his system. You're saying he should... Yeah, you're saying... Yes, it is in his system.
And that's the point Adam is saying. Is not suggesting that he took it as an opportunity to mask, because they use this agent apparently as a masking agent for anabolic steroids. The suggestion is that ultimately, if you've signed up to the British Boxing Board of Control and you've got a licence, you know that their governance is strict liability.
Yes.
So irrespective of whether it was an accident of ingestion or bad advice from your camp, or you were in fact guilty of it,
my gut feeling,
you are responsible for it.
My gut feeling is that
so he should just say...
My gut feeling is that he didn't necessarily take drugs, that he didn't want to enhance himself, because I just don't think that's the guy. But if he's failed tests, 1, 2, then something's happened.
Yes.
Therefore, maybe he just should have said at the time, I don't know what's happened, but I'm responsible for what's in my body. And if that had happened, I don't think it would have taken 2 years to sort this stuff out. And it's still not sorted.
No, neither do I. I mean, I sat with Conor because he asked to see me a year ago, because obviously there's a lot of noise in the media, and he asked to sit down with me, and he asked me, do you think I took it? I said, don't know. He said, well, what do you expect? Well, I said, hang on a second. I'm not your rabbi. I can't give you benediction here. You know, ultimately, the only person that knows the reality of that question is yourself. And did
he know, Simon? Because I'm not sure he knew. I think he didn't. I'm pretty sure he didn't.
Well, maybe
something's got in there.
But maybe that's true as equally. But the argument that I find very interesting, and we'll go to Robert Smith in just 1 second, but I just want to land this point, is that we had in the studio a year ago a very significant individual, a very well-rounded and learned individual, a guy called Rennie Carriol, who's a main board member of Pepsi Cola, a very smooth operator, that sat in the studio and said, we have got unadulterated, unfettered evidence that we can anatomically and medically and clinically prove that there is no way that this stuff in his system could have been ingested via any form of drug inducement, because it doesn't metabolize that way. The metabolite's in his system. So you've got medical evidence that can prove it. Why has no one ever run that evidence?
Yes.
The evidence that's been run, and the case that's been run, as far as I'm understanding, is around jurisdiction. And I think ultimately, as a result of that, no one comes out of it particularly well. But before we debate who comes out of it well or not, let's see what Robert Smith from the British Boxing Board of Control had to say about it all.
Simon said yesterday, amongst other things, that this demonstrates to him that your organisation, the British Boxing Board of Control, is virtually a tiger with no teeth. What do you say to that, Robert?
I think, Simon's entitled to his opinion. I've got no problem. I don't agree with him at all. And I'm sure I'm allowed to say I don't agree with him. But, you know, he doesn't know how the board works properly. I've obviously spoken to Simon on different matters, etc. previously. I'm very happy to have a conversation with him on what we do. But I think that's a little bit harsh, to be fair.
If Ben is cleared to fight, does that mean he's cleared of any wrongdoing?
Let's just see if the appeal takes place first. As I say, the provisional suspension has been lifted, and at the moment he can apply for a licence. See what happens after that, Jim.
Whenever you challenge anybody in any sport, it's because you don't understand the fabric of it, apparently. And of course, no one understands all the nuance of the British Boxing Board of Control and its meetings and its structure. You can read their rules and see how often they are enforced or how often they aren't enforced. The challenge for me is, I think, reading between the lines, the British Boxing Board of Control are preparing themselves for potentially being let down by UKAD, and UKAD not doing what the governing body of anti-doping in this country should do, which is say, I'm sorry, these are our rules. You've got 2 failed drugs tests. We're very open to you convincing us to the reason why we should have clemency in this area, but you don't get out from underneath the jurisdiction.
Can I make a point here? Who's in charge of this whole thing? That is the problem. That lies the problem in boxing and why we keep shooting ourselves in the foot time and time again. Because you've got all these different tests, all these different boards. You've got the board in Britain, you've got Saudi, you've got America, different commissions.
Yep.
There's no sort of whole unit. So people are confused. People don't know. They don't know whether these fighters took drugs or didn't. And 2 years, the only thing the general public wants, I think, the casual sports fans, is to see a fight like Ben Eubank and get involved and see them fight in the ring. I don't think they really care, but I think what's the problem is we don't have sort of somebody who says, this is the way it is, and you can appeal, but you've got all these different angles and isn't it? I mean, it's odd. It's an odd sport.
I mean, it's what I said to you at the beginning. Who is in charge? UCAD, the national board, the board. It's and that's for us. What about the normal average fan? He or she has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, we're struggling to understand it. We've been in boxing for years.
There's always this argument, isn't there, about having an overarching international governing body. And there is merit in that. But don't forget, when you watch football in space like that, there's a lot of people that would be very dissatisfied with FIFA and how they operate as the ultimate governing body. So there's pros and cons. But for me, I look at this and say, if the inherent ultimate responsibility for anti-doping in the country is UCAD, then they should have the jurisdiction over any failed test, and it should have to go through them. The British Boxing Board of Control, we know, needs more money, needs better funding, needs better structures, and probably at times needs some more resource around Robert in order to give it some more teeth so it can actually lead from the front.
Well, he didn't agree with you there, did he?
Well, he didn't agree with the idea that I say that they're a toothless tiger, because why would he? Because ultimately that's suggesting that ultimately he and his gang are not fit for purpose. So he's not going to agree with that, is he? Whether it's a slightly unfair analogy, because he can only follow on from the guidance of the effective regulator around doping, which is UCAD. And if UCAD don't step up, then there's not a lot that Robert or the British Boxing Board of Control can really do. No. What do we think is next for Conor? I mean, Conor, of course, is going to be running around saying he's cleared. The suspension is lifted. Right?
He has already, and Eddie and the whole team.
And that's fine, and they'll spin it how they want to spin it, and that's what their job should be.
But in a way, we're excited, as fans, to have him back.
I'm excited to see him back. I mean, I would like to see him fight in his own weight class, and I'm not excited by this Chris Eubank fight. I know you've made the point about the fact that it's for the casuals and it will give an opportunity for an audience to grow on the back of it. But, Frank Smith from Matchroom was talking the other day about Chris Eubank only having a year left in him and maybe a very small amount of fights, if only one. What do you think? Do you think Conor now, as a matter of course, if the dust clears and the suspension being lifted, is now the gateway to this fight? Do you think that's the next fight?
100%. I think absolutely has to be Conor Benn and Chris Eubank in the first quarter of 2025. I think we'll get a couple of them. I think it's the fight we need, Simon. I know it's not. There's there's differences in the weight. We had all this before, but the two of them are enigmatic. They're characters. They're not their dads, but they're the best we've got at the moment in terms of that story, the hook. That we look back to the Froch Groveses and the Hay Bellews, and we're going to love this. We're going to enjoy the build-up. We're going to have the fight. No one really knows who's going to win.
Those were legitimate world champions fighting at the end at levels. Bellew was a world champion. Hay was a former world champion. Froch was a world champion. Groves was a massive contender.
I'm not saying they're world champions, but it's still a great story.
It's a good fight.
It's a good fight, and no one knows who's going to win.
I've always felt that a 147 fighter jumping up to 160, draining Chris Eubank down from 168 down to 157, where he looked emaciated, was a horror story of a fight.
Well, I think it's the same for both fighters. If you see Conor when he's not at 147, or let's say through this period when he was inactive, he was literally in the gym at 175. Yeah. And I saw that from my own eyes. So I guess, yes, you can say Conor's fighting at a weight which is not his, but you're also naturally his. But then you have to take into account the age of Chris Eubank Jr., the fact that he has to... I mean, we saw him in Saudi...
So if Chris Eubank Jr. was your fighter, would you boil him down to 160?
Well, it depends what I see him walking around as. But I know, being in America, being in Las Vegas, I remember Adrian Broner fighting at 135. And with my own eyes, I saw him on the scale at 167. with my own eyes, and he was getting down to 135. So this is not, anyone who's in the gym with fighters know this is a normal thing. Fighters don't walk around, fighters walk around at a weight, maybe sometimes 2, 3, 4 pounds. You know, Richard Williams, I remember him sitting at ringside at Your Call saying he makes the weight easy. But then years later telling me he was dying. He hadn't eaten for 2-3 days.
Of course.
So I mean, the weight factor. But I mean, if these are two highly conditioned athletes, the weight shouldn't really play a factor.
You know, I was more disappointed about it first time around when it happened, and what you were saying about, you know, Chris coming down and Conor coming up. I was thinking, they're only doing this just for the fame, for the money. And actually now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking I'm really excited about the fight, because I don't know who's going to win at this stage of their careers. Connor's sort of coming off a long period of inactivity, a couple of fights, but Chris also hasn't really been regular. He had the double with Billam-Smith, but we just want to see them both in the ring. And I think that we missed out on so many fights. I was being with Lennox Lewis this week, and I was talking about no Lewis Bowe. I was talking about no Hatton Witter, no Calzaghe Frott. We haven't had AJ Wilder, and we haven't had AJ and Fury yet. Sure. But these two want to fight, so let's get it on.
Yes.
Who do you think wins that fight, Tunde?
It's a good fight. I think the skill factor has to go with Chris Eubanks. The skill factor has to. But the sheer aggression, you know, you look at...
Ferocity.
You look back at the father going over to America and fighting Doug DeWitt,
Barkley,
and just
the work rate,
it was the work rate, the aggression, the fitness, and Chris has that also. But the skill factor he definitely has. He is going to be the naturally bigger man. It's a good fight, and I do. It's a toss up, and I feel that's why fans are going to tune in. Fans are going to back, and the casuals are going to back.
They'll definitely tune in. I mean, I'm seeing Conor's dad later this week, who last time around wanted to give me a slap because he didn't like some of my observations, so that'll be an interesting conversation. But I mean,
Nigel's great.
Yeah, I mean, listen, going back to Nigel, the ferocity and bad intentions and malevolence of Nigel Benn are something to behold.
Neither of them are near their dads, right? I mean, Chris Eubanks, I grew up, I loved his theatre, whatever. When I ended up working at Sky, I enjoyed working with Nigel to the back end of his career. Steve Collins, they were great times. This is different, and they fought at different weights, but they've still got the different personalities, the contrasting characters. You're either going to be with Eubank or you're going to be with Ben. Let's see them meet.
And we don't want to lose the fight, because I heard Gareth A. Davis mention...
sorry about that.
I heard him mention David Anavician for Conor. And I'm like, we don't need that fight. That's a dangerous fight.
Conor don't need it either.
That's a dangerous fight.
We don't want that fight. And I think Turki Al-Sheikh knows, and I think they're clever enough to know that this is the time to make that fight. Beginning of 2025, we'll get a couple of them, and let's see who's better.
Talking about fights that we don't need, Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, Friday on Netflix. Where are you boys on this?
Deep breath. I'll be watching it like that. It's really sad. Mike Tyson was magnetic. Tunde and I were talking earlier. Remember the names of Michael Jackson, Mike Tyson in that era. They were two most famous people in the world, probably.
Yes.
And Mike's window, where he was knocking out the likes of Michael Spinks, and when I was there for the Calder Truth Williams fight, I'll never forget it. It was unreal.
Tyrell Biggs.
This is so long ago, right? He's nearly 60. I've spent the week with Lennox Lewis, and Lennox was asked his opinion, and he said, "Look, I don't like it. It's just he was just everyone in the room when we were with were like, you know, it's just that sort of feeling of why are we seeing this legend out there doing this?" And Lennox was saying, I'll be there because my kids want to see Jake Paul. Right. So look, it's entertainment. The young like Jake Paul, what he's done, Logan, KSI, all of that, I get it. For me, so long as it's a sort of controlled exhibition almost, and both come out healthy and happy, I'm all right with it.
Where are you on this emergence of YouTuber boxing? Do you think Tunde is a trainer that will be looking at the next generation of fighters that might come through your gym as this sort of thing is a great signpost, it gives people more interest? Or do you just see YouTubers as commercial guys that are making a lot of money out of a new medium?
Well, there are YouTubers who can actually fight. There are YouTubers who are actually better than some of the stuff you see in Your Call week in, week out. So it's not that. I think the money is the factor. It's prize fighting. So ultimately, people want to earn money. And if there's an opportunity to earn vast more money than you would make selling 100 tickets that you would call, then people are going to do it, Sam.
It's like Tommy Fury, okay? Tommy Fury may never make anything much in the boxing world. He might get to a certain level, but in the misfits world, with KSI and all that, why not?
And I just feel,
it's a business.
But going back to the Mike fight, you know, we spoke about this on our show last night, and to me it was strange is how many fighters actually still feel Mike might do the job. Everyone's talking about the fact that the last thing a fighter loses is his punch. But I'm like, but what about his resistance?
And his legs.
What about when he gets punched? And so there's a lot. Me personally, I don't want to see Mike go at that. But as long as I believe it's scripted. I can't see why Mike...
Tunde, I sort of hope it is, right? Scott Welsh was telling me the other day, and he's younger than Mike Tyson. He keeps himself in very good shape still, but he said he did a little bit of sparring with young Tommy, his son, and he said he cracked ribs, and he said he didn't know where he was when he got hit by a shot. He said, your body at that stage, however well you've looked after it, and we've got to remember, there's been times where Mike hasn't looked after his body at all. So, OK, you can get yourself in terrific shape over a few months, but fighting shape at nearly 60.
Well, we saw what happened to Evander Holyfield when he tried to fight the MMA guy.
Yeah.
You know, he got decapitated, literally. And I mean, listen, we watched the episodes on Netflix in the build-up to the fight. And, I mean, there's something within all of us that feel Mike can do this, what he's been through. And
because you sort of want that. What you want the old Mike Tyson that you remembered from the history to sort of come back and give us one last great performance. Yeah. But it's a difficult one. It's one that everyone's going to watch, but I don't know what the best outcome is. I think it's...
Oh, I know what it is. I'd like to see Mike Tyson knock him on his arse.
Yeah.
Right? And put this nonsense to bed.
Yes.
That's what I'd like to see.
And then it's over for the kids, but the kids are loving it.
Is it? I mean, is it ultimately?
The kids are loving it.
I get it. Misfits. I mean, and that's why I was asking Tunde from the outset, is it going to manifest itself in a new generation of boxing and kids coming through that show the prerequisite amount of enthusiasm? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just a purist about things, and maybe I'm a bit anal retentive about it, and thinking about the idea. You know, I grew up. I went to see Tyson fight Frank Bruno in '89. Yeah. I watched all his fights as a kid. And you look at that monster, obviously culminating in the defeat to Buster Douglas and everything that went after that, and his life took a turn that ultimately he will regret, no doubt.
But still thrilling, and still some great performances after that.
A phenomenal
winning the world title again after the jail sentence.
Absolutely. But to see him in the ring with the sole necessity, surely, is economic.
Of course.
And for Mike to be in a situation where he's had this amount of money, and he won't be the first, and I'm sure he won't be the last boxer that's gone through hundreds of millions of dollars and found himself in a situation where he has to put himself in a ring with somebody like Jake Paul, who to my mind is just a product of today's society rather than particularly a talented individual. And
he's worked hard at what he's done.
Yeah.
And he's got the ring. Right. And you're right, one or two of them are probably better than some fighters, but they're earning a huge amount more money than the guys at your call, which is where the difficulties come. But I've got a question for you, right? So if you say Mike Tyson wins, that's what you want to see, Jake Paul ridded. What happens then if Mike Tyson calls out Lennox Lewis and then Evander Holyfield gets and suddenly you've got that? We don't want that.
I don't want to see a real life version of grudge match. No, I'm not interested in seeing Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone at 107 in a ring, replicated by Lennox Lewis.
No, but if Tyson wins, what does that...
Well, maybe it quenches the financial diet that he needs to have quenched. But look, one of the real fights, or the real fight on that evening, is Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. I mean, there is a school of thought that Katie's slowing down a little bit. I don't know where you guys are on that, but this is a great fight again, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm very close to Katie and followed her career ever since she was a top amateur, the best amateur, and what she's done for boxing as a whole, not just female boxing full stop, has been unbelievable. I was there after my illness. I went back to see her rematch with Chantel Cameron in Dublin. The place was unbelievable. I thought on the back of that she'd fight Chantel in a third fight at Croke Park. They couldn't make the finances work, so here she is getting huge money to fight on this bill, Netflix. It's a fabulous fight. The first time round was brilliant against Amanda Serrano. And I think the second one will be as good. I can't see anything else.
Oh, we're definitely in for a treat. I just feel both of the ladies are in the twilights of their career. And I feel because of that, it will make a great fight. Amanda is a big puncher. Katie did look like she was slowing down a bit. But it's just a great fight for women. And again, I saw a tweet from Amanda saying that, you know, they made $1 million, close to $1 million in the first fight, and they've doubled that. They've blown out the water. So it's a good advert all round for women's boxing, and maybe we're equaling. I don't know if the minutes, the 2-minute rounds or the 3-minute rounds.
Well, I was going to ask you about that.
Yes.
As a trainer looking at this argument that rages about the 2-minute round to the 3-minute round, and the fact that there's a likelihood that in women's boxing that if you move from 2 to 3, you're going to see more knockouts. I think there was a debate about how Savannah Marshall might have done in the fight against Alicia Shields if there'd been 3-minute rounds rather than 2-minute rounds.
Yes.
Where are you on the principle of women's boxing morphing from 2 into 3?
Well, I don't believe that. I just believe it's hard to knock out anyone, and I spoke about this on Saturday. You know, people talk about more knockouts, but, you know, you look through careers, very few people have, you know, an 80% knockout ratio.
Sure.
So I don't believe that.
At that level.
At that level, you know, at that level, at any level. Go to York, you see a lot of points fights. There's not many knockout punches, because to knock someone out is actually a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing, regardless of the level you're fighting at. So I don't personally think that it will make that much difference, whether it's 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
Most of the women I've spoken to want 3 minutes. I'm not sure it's the equality thing. I think they just feel that would be better for them. But then there's the argument from the TV side that 10-2s always give us fantastic firefights. It's quick. It's difficult to judge each round, but it's fast, and they're almost always a terrific battle. If they're matched right, the women give us great fights, and I think this is another one.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? There's always this desire to have whatever you haven't got is the reasons why something isn't what you think it should be.
Yes.
And women's boxing at this moment in time is on a great trajectory. So the idea that it needs to change from 2 to 3 minute rounds to deal with an argument, I think probably leave it alone. If it ain't broke, you don't need to fix it. Talking about fixing things or not fixing things, where are you guys on Anthony Joshua's decision, seemingly, if it is indeed his decision alone to make, that he's not going to be Daniel Dubois' next opponent?
I think it's a great decision from Team Joshua. Knowing AJ, I'd have thought in the hours afterwards, all he wanted to do was get back in the ring with Daniel Dubois and try and get the revenge. However, I'm happy that obviously Freddie Cunningham, the team, and Eddie, they've talked and they've worked out, and there's a slight injury, I think, as well, that he doesn't go back in with Dubois next time. I think that's right. I think he should sit out and just wait and see what happens with Usyk and Fury. And if Fury loses, they make Fury AJ next, and you forget Dubois for now. That's my take on it.
Tunde.
Well, regardless of what happens, I was never happy with the fight in the first place, just because of the stages of their careers. And I guess that the apple was the IBF belt for AJ.
Yeah.
Did you think Dubois would win beforehand?
Absolutely. And everyone who was listening to The Fight Is Right on a Sunday knew for weeks. Everyone, you know, my friend, co-host, brother Spencer Fearon was saying that, you know, AJ's ordained, and I was like, well, Daniel could be ordained as well. And I've known Daniel from a kid. I used to train Daniel, and he's always getting better, and he's still young. And I think people forget how young he is, still at this age. And so for what AJ had been through, his career, what he's achieved, there was really nothing, there was no incentive there. So the fact that...
We wanted to become a 3-time...
So what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, Tunde? I mean, ultimately, we had this big, long journey of the year where he fought Jermaine Franklin, he fought Robert Helenius, he fought Otto Wallin, he fought Ngannou, and did boxing a great service by dealing with Ngannou, because I think Fury made it a little bit, a bit of a ridicule opportunity for boxing, with the MMA guys coming in and making boxers look, so-called elite boxers look not elite.
Not elite.
But were you in the camp that Anthony Joshua had gotten back to where he may have been at some point in his career and was ready to go? Because it doesn't sound like you were.
What do you mean ready to go?
Well, ready to win a world title, ready to go into a fight. Because ultimately, he talked constantly about wanting to be a 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. Somewhere along the line, he's going to have to fight a live one. Yes. I didn't think Jermaine Franklin, Robert Helenius, and Otto Wallin were as live as having to fight for a world title belt, obviously. So the first one he's gone in against in a live one was Daniel Dubois, and he's gotten knocked out. Were you on that? Where were you as far as Anthony Joshua?
The fight I wanted, and many people wanted to see, was Tyson Fury. And I think even now, Tyson Fury will be the fight for AJ.
Because of the styles, or just because of the size of the fight?
Just because of the styles, and it's a fight that... It's a huge fight. Again, it's a Conor Benn Eubank situation. And I feel like, you know, I was even saying on our show, Tyson should pull a sickie against Usyk, and let's just make the fight. AJ against Tyson Fury.
We're looking forward to Usyk Fury. I think it's going to be a great fight. That's December 21st. AJ sits it out and waits. I think what I didn't like post the Joshua defeat was that everybody was talking about AJ. What happens to him? Does he retire? What went wrong, etc.
Not about Daniel's
What
achievements.
about Daniel Dubois,
Absolutely.
who has done incredibly well to pick himself up, firstly with Joe Joyce, then in the Usyk situation, which was a difficult one to come to terms with. He goes out, he does really well against Baby Miller. And then he takes Hrgovic, fantastic, and he comes in and he everything about him from the first moment you saw him at Wembley, walking out to the opening jab, the feet. He was ruthless and he was absolutely superb. And I think he's 27 years old. I think this is a guy that the country can get behind, right? We've had AJ and Fury, and Daniel's quieter. He's a different character, but he's a lovely guy.
Getting more confident, isn't he?
He is getting more confident. He's starting to feel himself. He's a funny bloke. And you know what? He went away to Brazil, Simon, for a few weeks with his family to relax. I saw him in the gym last week. He's just back in the gym. Most fighters who come off a holiday take some time to get back.
Straight back
he
in.
looked so sharp.
Yeah.
He's got a wonderful jab. He's got a great right hand. He fights with both hands. He's got a good uppercut. He moves well for a heavyweight. I tell you what, you did a good job with him.
Yeah, can I just say, this is the reason why I said it was always a dangerous fight for Daniel. I've known Stan and the family from the day they was bringing Caroline, Daniel into the Lim. Solomon Solomon wasn't born then, I don't think, into the Lim Boxing Club. And the reason why he looked like that when you saw him the other day is because there's no days off.
No.
You know, Daniel's someone who's, and I wouldn't be surprised if after the Usyk defeat, his dad was making him train the day after, because he's a born fighter. And this is what I was saying when we're talking about the AJ situation and Daniel's situation. AJ found boxing. Daniel was born into boxing.
I agree with that, but I do think Joshua has trained ever so hard. He loves the training side
But
of
this
it.
is what I'm saying. So Daniel, so again, we're talking about two athletes here.
Yep.
We're talking about one that found boxing and trains hard.
Yes.
We're talking about another individual who had no choice.
Yes.
I was there the days in Greenwich Park when Daniel's dad had Caroline and Daniel sprinting. We're talking about from birth, you know, up until the present day. And this is why he's going to get better. This is why he continues to get better. And this is why the fight that was really supposed to happen was they thought Hrgovic was going to beat Daniel.
They did.
And that would have made way for
because
the
what
AJ
happened in
fight.
sparring all those years ago, and he took his lumps and bumps in the first couple of rounds, he really did. But the way he came through it, and you talk about how he's getting more confident, he spoke after that the best I've ever heard him. He was free.
But I also saw him speaking the other day to Jim White, and the manner in which he articulates himself now. You know, his father is a very influential figure in his life. And I remember reading, and I've said this before, Jeff Powell wrote an article about 4 years ago, just before the fight with Joe Joyce, which I went to. And I thought Daniel wasn't mentally prepared, whether the environment, because it was empty during COVID, and you know, you could hear a pin drop because there was nobody there. I watched him in a ring walk and he looked ill at ease with the environment. And the fight was a more difficult fight than he anticipated. And once he realised that he couldn't knock Joe Joyce out, the game changed. And obviously he had that injury and a lot of people made a lot of noise and made accusations.
Joseph Park or Joe Joyce?
Joe Joyce.
Yes.
Yeah. During COVID, yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah. And so he's now developed into the fighter that people like Jeff Powell were talking about, which was forget about Fury, forget about Joshua.
Yes.
This kid's the future.
Yes.
This is the guy that's going to be dominating heavyweight boxing. Anyway, listen, Frank Warren joined me last week on another show talking about Daniel Dubois, his next opponent. Let's see what Frank had to say.
It's very, very, very doubtful. And, you know, that he'll fight. There'll be the rematch. I don't think that's happened. And we're working on other opponents at the moment. I literally got off the phone about half hour ago to his father and to his trainer, Don Charles. And we're looking at a couple of options.
Joe Parker, Frank? Joe Parker, Frank?
He's one of the fighters that are on the list.
Good fight there. It's a good fight there.
It's a very good fight. I haven't got all the fights with that. When's Daniel Dubois not been in a good fight? Every fight he has.
Agreed. But it's a good fight. Ultimately, if we can't get the AJ situation, which a lot of people want to see for obvious reasons, if you're going to then put someone else in, I think Joseph Parker has earned the right to be in there, isn't he?
He has, and as well as other guys have. It's been a very, very lively scene, this heavyweight scene, this last 12 months. There's no doubt about that.
And Frank, while we have you on this lively lunchtime, what next for Fabio Wardley?
He will fight next year. We're looking at some fights and opponents for him. He'll fight somebody who's ranked in the top 10, and he'll be looking for a big fight, which we're going to do for him at his hometown football club, Ipswich, in the summer.
So I helped Frank out with a nice, easy fight matchmaking for
That's
Daniel.
great, wasn't it?
What do you think of it? If that fight does get made, what do you think of that fight, Parker Dubois?
I love the Joe Parker fight. I think he deserves it. Everything you said there was right. He's earned his stripes. He's actually been out the ring a little bit too long. I thought he was going to be more used by Turki Al-Sheikh in the whole sort of heavyweight pot. But he's put on a bit of weight. He's bulked up a bit, Joe, because he wants a little bit more power. He wants to fight Dubois. He's been calling him out. And again, I think the Dubois camp want that fight. So it's up to the money guys to make it, and let's see it. I think it's a perfect defence for Daniel Dubois in February. It's the fight we want to see, isn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a hard fight for his first defence. I mean, give him a break. You know,
is that what Frank was between the lines? Were you reading there that Frank was looking at
maybe,
someone slightly easier?
Whether it's reading between the lines or not, I think Daniel isn't.
Would you rather have him, Martin Piccoli?
No. That's even worse. But I'm saying, listen, if you're saying Joseph Parker, then why not Joe Joyce? Joe Joyce beat Joseph Parker. That's a good fight. Yeah, for Daniel, it's a homecoming fight.
Okay, the homecoming fight I get, right?
Yes.
He's had the difficult fight with Joshua, and it doesn't really matter. There's not the pressure. He's still just 27.
It's a rematch. It's a rematch. It can sell. It's redemption. It's an opportunity for Daniel to right the wrong.
It's fine.
It was in COVID. You don't want to be... You tell me, probably in the history of the heavyweight division, where you've had a major fight and then you've gone back into another fight. You've got to give these fighters time to hold the belt, relish the belt,
But you've got to
make
say
the
it's a
defense.
good fight.
It is absolutely it's a good fight. AJ versus Deontay Wilder is a good fight. There are many good fights in the heavyweight division. I just feel that Daniel, after being thrown in deep twice, fights where he wasn't supposed to win. He wasn't supposed to win the Miller fight. He wasn't supposed to win the Hrgovic fight. And he came through. And then he definitely, absolutely wasn't supposed to win AJ fight.
So if it's not Joyce, who could it be? I know Derek still wants to fight. I mean, we don't want that,
Derek
do we?
ain't fighting, Daniel. I
So
don't
who
like
else
that fight
could
at
there
all.
be?
Well, there's many fights. I mean, you can put him in with F.I.A. Jagbar. That's a fight for Daniel. A very good fight for Daniel. Even the fighter that Martin McCauley just beat, Gerard Anderson.
Yeah.
These are good fights. I mean, Daniel really has the world at his feet at present, and I just feel that Joseph Parker is a little tough for his first defence. I mean, give him a chance.
I think that in order to seal the deal with the public about what Daniel Dubois is going to become, which is a force within boxing, I think he has to take meaningful fights. And we talk about, did it happen before? Yeah, we saw Tyson go, and I know it's for 36 years ago or 38 years ago, but he went from one fight to the next, to the next, to the next. And ultimately, if we're re-establishing a credibility in boxing, and Turki Al-Sheikh is doing some of that, you take the live ones, don't you? I do also understand the argument that he's earned the right to maybe have Nick Ball got an easier fight after having two very big battles.
And that's the sort of thing Frank does. He's a brilliant, probably the best matchmaker in boxing, and has been for years. So he probably will be thinking a little bit more like Tunde here.
I just like Joe Parker. I think he's earned the right.
It is a brilliant fight. It is a brilliant fight, and one that Daniel, can, I don't like to use the word, but lose and still come back because he is so young. But let's do it the old way. Let's get rid of the old guards. Let's get rid of a Dylan White. Sorry, Dylan. I don't want Dylan after me, but let's fight Dylan White. Let's fight Joe Joyce. Let's let those guys finish on a high in their careers, the one that's in the twilights of their careers. And then, Daniel's only 27 years old. There's plenty of time to make these big fights.
I totally get what Tunde's saying, and in many ways I agree with it from a matching promoter's point of view, but from a public fan base point of view, and with Turki, what he's doing, a Parker fight works for me.
Can I just say one last thing? In this country, who would the fans mostly want to see? Daniel Dubois versus Joseph Parker, or Daniel Dubois versus Dylan White, or Daniel Dubois versus Joe Joyce? The people don't really... boxing fans know Joe Joyce. They know fans. But I'm talking about the wider public. Dylan White can make that sell. Everyone knows
White,
that.
yes.
Dylan
yes.
White sold out Wembley with Tyson Fury.
Definitely. Dillian White could be. Yeah.
I think Dylan would be incredibly commercially lucky to get that opportunity, but I take your point. Frank was also mentioning the idea that Fabio Wardley is a stadium fight, or could have a stadium fight. Who do you think? I mean, there was some mutterings and splutterings about Fabio going in with Daniel Dubois, which I thought was ridiculous for Fabio.
No,
I know he's inside the top 10 and brilliant for him. But where do you see? I suggested for Fabio someone like Jared Anderson, who McCauley just beaten, because
or Joe Joyce. I mean, I think Fabio Wardley is a fantastic story. Absolutely brilliant. You know, the lack of experience, the white collar fighter coming good, and look where he is. And he went to Frank, and he's stopped Fraser Clark. He's in a great position. Don't rush him.
Yeah.
Just take your time a little bit.
And I think Fabio thinks that himself as well.
Yeah, give him two or three good fights around the sort of top 20 heavyweight division, and let's sort of ease him in. We don't need to rush him and spoil what's a great story. I'd love to see him fight in Ipswich. He's so popular around those parts. He speaks really well. Yeah, he's a fantastic ambassador for the sport. Yeah. He's a great tale. Let's not mess it up.
I was just about to say Dylan White, but then I just realised that Dylan's his manager, so...
That's going to be a difficult one, isn't it?
It's going to be a difficult one.
You're trying to get Dylan fights.
And I'll be after my 10% when I make them as well, when I make them. But, you know, Fabio is someone he's got to be admired.
Indeed.
You know, and we need to look at individuals like this, show you that you can come from nothing.
Absolutely and
be something. Yeah. You know, beating an Olympian, stopping an Olympian, the way he did in Saudi. And I just feel there are many fights. The thing about the heavyweight division, you got the top, you know, let's say 1 to 5, and then really...
It's a great deal after that.
There's a great deal of fighters that are in the pot. So Fabio, I think Jared Anderson would be a good fight for Fabio. Yeah. Definitely. Or even the fighter that AJ boxed on his return.
What, Jermaine Franklin?
Jermaine Franklin, because he's on a winning run again. So again, it's someone that and Fabio actually fought on that bill, because I remember I was there that night when he fought an American. So I think that's a good fight.
And Franco matched them well, and it's a bit like Johnny Fisher, right? Let's enjoy the stories. They're different ones.
Absolutely.
We should do that.
Chris Billam-Smith goes in against Zurdo Ramirez.
Good fight.
This is a good fight, isn't it?
It is.
How do you see this one, Tunde?
This, you know, Chris Billam-Smith is the guy that we always think is going to lose, but always ends up winning.
Certainly against...
He's done so well, hasn't he?
Well, I didn't think he was going to lose against Masternak, but I did think he was going to beat Riakpo, and I did think he was going to lose to Riakpo, and I did think he was going to lose to Akoli. I didn't think he was going to have as much trouble as he did against Masternak.
You didn't think he was going to lose against Riakpo?
No, I did.
Okay,
I'm agreeing with you. Yes. I'm saying that of the 3 fights that I am looking at in the last 18 months, the one that I didn't pick him,
which he had trouble with,
to lose in, was Masternak, which was the one that he had a lot of trouble in.
Yes.
But isn't he brilliant? I mean, if someone has just got the best out of himself, he works hard. I talk about nice people in boxing, possibly the nicest. He is.
That's why he's called the gentleman.
He's fabulous, Chris Billam-Smith, and he's worked so hard for this. And when he went to Selhurst Park and he beat Riakpo, he's done things away from home. Now he goes to Saudi. I think he's the favourite here. You know, Zurdo Ramirez, terrific fighter. Yes, I do. Only one defeat, but he's come up in weight, and I think Chris is the bigger, more natural cruiserweight. It's a unification. I wouldn't write him off in this one.
Well, I don't think he's the bigger fighter, because Zurdo, knowing Zurdo from way back when, I don't know how he ever made super middleweight.
Super middleweight, quite heavy. Billam-Smith's a big boy.
Definitely, but so is Zurdo. And he, not only that, his boxing IQ is going to be far higher than anything Chris Billam-Smith have ever seen. Because if you think about it, yes, he's done well, he's had these fights, but they're all British fighters. Isaac Chamberlain, Richard Riakpo, Lawrence Akoli, who, yes, is a world champion, but still there is Jack Massey. You know, we're talking about Miguel Sol Canelo's sparring partner for years, and was really dominant in the super middleweight division. And it took someone like Dimitri Bivol to really just outclass him. But up until then, Zurdo was, it's just a joy to watch from a south, and he's a southpaw. Again, I don't recall Chris Billam-Smith actually fighting any world level southpaws.
Zurdo's a great fighter, and he's a southpaw, and he's going to be difficult, and he's going to be tricky. I just don't like, Chris Billam-Smith has been time and time again, just dismissed. I just think this is a chance now on a bigger stage to unify divisions. And I think because of his natural size and because of his confidence and momentum and the guy that's in his corner, by the way, in Shane McGuigan, I think you're going to have a really good performance again from Billam-Smith. Ramirez is tough and he's skillful.
I do believe. I'm rooting for Billam-Smith in this fight, mainly because I want Anthony Yarde to go up there and fight him.
I thought that was coming in. Why?
That's the why, but, and that's the reason. And so I'll be definitely cheering for Chris Billam-Smith, but we don't want to fool the public. This is a very, very difficult fight against a skilled technician from the right-handed side.
But to be fair, to get 2 belts at world level, it should be difficult. And the alternative is what? Going against Opataya at this moment in time. Yeah. I actually think for Chris to go, and if he beats Ramirez, he's got 2 belts. He comes to the table on commercial discussions, despite Jai's protestations that he would have given him more money from the fight and was prepared to pay him more than he was getting. I think commercially, if Chris comes to the table, having got 2 belts, having defended his title 3 or 4 times against Jai Opataya, then commercially he might get more money out of the equation.
But this is where, I think
maybe if he beats Ramirez.
Maybe I just seeing things different. I was saying that I actually think the Opataya fight would have been a better fight for him.
Really?
And the reason being is that, yes, Opataya is a 4th generation fighter from his family, but he is still relatively a novice. Other than the Olympic or the amateur experience.
2 fights against Breeders.
But that's it. The 2 fights, and they were tough fights. They were tough fights. I think Gilberto, the reason is just that he's just been around for a long time. He is getting older, but I just think the IQ, I believe that with Chris Billam-Smith's style, the pressure, I think he would have given Jai Opataya a harder fight.
I think Opataya is superb, and I think he's going to be in the pound-for-pound list for a while. I really like him. And I think that if Chris wins this fight, which is possible, I do. I think it's a real possible fight for him to win. And if he does that and gets 2 belts, why not? That's an amazing payday for him against Opataya. He'll believe he can beat him. I think Opataya is different level to these guys.
But we say different level, but what are we basing it on? Who? On what? Okay, Brady's Prescott, but Jordan Thompson is not.
Yeah, Jordan Thompson.
But Jordan, I'm just saying, Jordan Thompson, Jack Massey are not really people that you would say, okay, these are really good world-class fighters. They're just normal. And I don't mean that disrespectfully.
I think it's the manner in which he...
Who else did he fight? Elizoro as well.
Elizoro, these are novices.
It's the manner of which he's just dispatched them and dealt with them. And
Adam, I could have done that. I could have done that.
I'm sure you could.
I could have beaten Zoro, Thompson, and Massey in the same manner.
On the same night.
Does that mean you don't subscribe to the view? Because that ultimately we're talking about a pound for pound here.
No, I just feel like, I got my trainer's hat on. I'm like, why is everybody running from this guy? Like, to me, he doesn't.
You don't think he's ready yet to have that accolade?
I don't think he is what everyone's building up. And I say this again, as wild as it sounds, Anthony Yarde does not watch other fighters. At the British Boxing Board of Control, when he won the Fight of the Year, or the Fight of the Year against Beterbiev, they had a highlight rule. And Anthony goes, who's that guy? And I give you a story. After the Beterbiev loss, George Warren, we was all sitting down in the office, and then he said, yeah, there's a geezer in New Zealand. He's got a belt. Do you want to fight him? And I was like, who's the geezer? Oh, it was Jai Opataya, by the way.
At that stage.
At that stage. But the thing is, just some geezer. But the thing is that Anthony looked at him on the screen, and Anthony said to me, turned to me, goes, who's that guy? I said, yeah, that's the guy that they wanted us to fight. I said, I'll fight him. And this is why, I'm supposed to be out there next week, ringside, to watch this fight.
Right.
And if we can't get the fight, which we've been asking for forever. Buatsi. Anthony Yarde is ready to go to cruiserweight.
Well, let's talk. You brought him up, and it's a natural segue. Thank you for doing that. But obviously, Anthony Yarde. I mean, I've always been a great admirer of Anthony's. I like him as a fighter. I love the second performance against Lyndon Arthur, not the first one, the second
Yes,
one, obviously. And I enjoyed watching him against Beterbiev, although I do think there was levels in that particular fight. You might disagree. But he's back now. But it wasn't the most
electrifying
performance, was it?
I mean, I go back to the words of Larry Merchant when Roy Jones fought Bernard Hopkins. And his words were, it is unfair to expect a fighter to be Superman or Captain America every time out. Now, Anthony Yarde has knocked out, I think, 24 or 26.
Yeah.
He's always exciting, which is why he's one of the rare individuals or fighters that can walk anywhere on the streets of the UK, the United States of America, and be instantly recognized. And said, I love this guy, I love the way he fights. And yes, it may be, but what people are not aware of as the battle outside of the ring, what it takes to get in a ring having so much on your head. And, you know, we got through. That's the way, it was a case of win and look good the next fight out. And that's exactly what will happen, Sam.
So, I mean, how tough? I mean, I have to say, I did feel, and you won't hear me say this very often, but I did feel that it was a strange decision, and I'm not asking you to get overly complicated in your decision. You know, Queensberry got you 2 world title shots very early against Kovalov.
But
and
you say got you,
so...
but again, I heard you say this one time, Sam. You said got you, but isn't Anthony the fighter? Didn't he have to put himself in that position?
Sure.
So I don't know why people keep on saying, I got you. Like, it's almost as though the fighters have no say in it. If he wasn't the fighter, there would be no opportunity.
That's true too.
So why are we always saying, why are people always saying Frank or Eddie or got you? The fighter has to be the one who puts the work into get that. They are the ones, they are the talent, they are the individuals. Without them.
And that's absolutely right, and I agree with you. You know, but on one hand, we will talk about promoters as being very skillful at engineering opportunities. The Saudi opportunity wouldn't exist if Frank Warren hadn't have gone and created an outcome with Turki Al-Sheikh that's produced this sort of outcome that everyone's going to benefit. No fighter would have done that.
Yes.
And the engineering of an opportunity to be able to get him a world title shot is in part a skill of a promoter. It doesn't exclude or diminish the opportunity or the value of the fighter. So I understand your point of view because you're coming from the fighter's point of view.
Yes.
And I'm certainly not coming from the promoter's point of view because I spend my time observing on their promoters and some of the things they do and don't do. And we've seen over the years how fighters have not been looked after by promoters or how they've been disabused of opportunities by promoters. But let's not get lost in the terminology of Anthony's opportunities that were created by his talent and some engineering by Frank Warren. I was surprised about the discourse that developed between you and Queensberry.
I'll speak about what you spoke about, the 2 opportunities. The first one, there weren't many fighters who had 12 amateur fights who would go over to Chelyabinsk, Russia and fight a pound for pound, Ring Magazine, Tusa, and
do very well.
And do very well, with limited experience. So although the opportunity was created, it took someone with big kahunas to go over there
and take that opportunity.
And we all know
could have won.
We all know the opportunity was given to many other fighters. So it was AY, Anthony Yarde, who has to be given the credit more than anyone. More than me, more than the team, more than Frank. Frank created the opportunity. Absolutely, but it was Anthony was the one ultimately.
Put up his hand and said, I want this.
And Mike Castillo, when I told him about the fight, he went, you're effing mad going over there. But this is what Anthony Yarde is made of. He's made of something which fighters, fans alike always want to see. And he has to be forgiven for a subpar performance. Last time out.
When he hasn't got a name in front of him or...
And you know, at this stage of Anthony's career, this is what it's about. At this stage of his career, it's the big fights which are going to motivate him.
The other night, you lined them up. There were so many names.
That's it. AY against Billam-Smith, AY against Obataya, AY against Beterbiev rematch, AY against Bivol. There is absolutely not one UK fighter where you can put them in one lane and line up so many other fighters and you know it's being sold. So this is what it is. So I'm like, so if you're telling me that after 28 fights or 29 fights, he has one performance that is not AY performance. I know you're going to say the Lennon Arthur fight, but again, Simon, I'll say it for the fans. AY lost 5, 6 family members in COVID in a space of 8 to 10 weeks. And, I said, I don't like this fight. And AY was like, I'm a fighter, Unks. I'm doing it.
But it's also a great thing, isn't it, when the expectation, you take the ups with the downs, right? The upside of Anthony Yarde is that people expect a lot from him. Because if they expected nothing from him, there'd be no interest in him.
Yes.
And so subsequently, the things that you talk about wouldn't be so significant because there'd be less interest.
Yes,
and
sir. Whether
it's true or not that he can be recognised on every high street, I like him a lot. I think he's an exhilarating and exciting fighter.
Why hasn't he fought Boazzi? That's the fight we want to see again. Another one.
Obviously, I know this is a discussion that's been ongoing. I know it's been tied up in complications around matching rights and issues of that nature. But
if both of them want to fight, you say he wants to fight anyone.
I'm going to say this.
Come on, why hasn't it been made?
I'm categorically saying it here in front of the great Simon Jordan and the great Adam Smith. Anthony Yarde is a free agent, never ducked, dodged, or avoided any fighter. We was ready to fight Boazzi in June, August, September, October. We are ready to fight Chris Billam-Smith if he picks up the title. We are ready to fight Jai Opataya. And there is nothing stopping that happening other than the opponents.
Okay.
It's not Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde's ready. And Anthony Yarde has been ready.
So when you allude to that, put aside the ramifications of contractual issues, which you now believe in your mind.
But there has never been a contractual issue.
I think Queensberry had a different view on it, but the fact he got into the ring and fought might tell you Queensberry's position, the real position. Right?
Yes, sir.
They'll argue, and Frank and George will argue about that, and I've seen the argument about matching rights, and I've seen Ben Shalom on the other side of that argument as well. Right? But here's the conversation.
This is the problem, the politics. This is what Turkey Al-Sheikh's changed, Simon.
Okay, but if we've got no more politics, because any legal issue that Queensberry might be able to have with your fighter stopping you from stepping in a ring is gone as far as you're concerned. What now stops Boazzi versus Yarde? If it's the next cab off the rank, are you saying it's Josh Boazzi? I'm
saying Anthony Yarde is ready to fight. I don't know Joshua Boazzi is Joshua Boazzi. Only he can answer that question. And again...
Is it the economics?
And again...
Because is it the economics of what you guys expect out of it?
It's always money. It's about valuing yourself and knowing what you're worth and standing on that.
So that could be a problem.
Again, it could be a problem, but if the fight was to be made or the fight was offered, we're ready to fight. It's not even be offered.
See, this is the other thing, Simon, that fighters want it. Joshua and Fury have wanted that fight for years.
This is the point.
Boazzi, I think Boazzi wants to fight.
No, so why hasn't it happened?
I do think he wants to fight.
No, but why hasn't it happened?
Maybe there's people around him that don't want it to happen. I don't know.
So
what I'm saying is the fighters want the fight.
No.
Joshua Boazzi's told me he wants to fight Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde, I know, wants to fight Joshua Boazzi. So why hasn't it happened? AJ wanted to fight Fury. Fury wanted to fight AJ, and it didn't happen.
Well, but the landscape now allows for something different. And the reasons why these fights didn't happen previously is because of arguments between promoters. Frank wouldn't touch Eddie with a shitty stick. The broadcasters had different dynamics about one another. You have that landscape separated now. You have Turkey Al-Sheikh saying, if I want this fight. Now, at the end of the day, a fight is worth what someone else is prepared to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And then it's worth what you're prepared to accept.
Yes,
and if the only market size is a certain price, you're going to have to take a view on what you're prepared to accept. But the next 12 months for Anthony is potentially make or break time for him, isn't it? You're talking now about the idea that he can go up to cruiserweight.
Yes, sir.
Is that because you think it's an easier pathway to get a world title?
No. Nothing. Anthony, he's never done anything easy.
Because you're going to get paid any more money in cruiserweight.
He has to be, and always likes a challenge. He's always up for a challenge. Yep. Hence why he's never ducked any fighter. And people keep on asking about this Boazzi fight, and I'm saying like, just speak to Ant. He wants to fight.
Well, just speak to Joshua, because I know that he wants to fight.
No. And this is what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. If he wants to fight, the fight would have been done. I'm saying that. If he wants to fight, the fight would have been done. He would not have fought Willie Hutchinson. when he could have fought us.
I'm not sure that's quite right.
Yeah, I know you're not.
No, I'm not sure that's quite right. I think the arguments. In fairness to this situation, the arguments between Queensberry and potentially Boxer that were in the mix of this conversation were all around Queensberry holding your feet to the fire about your contractual situation. You've maintained all along, I understand that they don't have these matching rights in perpetuity, but there's always been that situation. And I know that the Hutchinson fight was put in place to honour contractual obligations between fighters and promoters.
But it's a good fight coming off the Craig Richards fight. That was a good fight.
To move into the logical fight that everybody wanted to see and everybody wants to see, which is Buatsi versus
Some people thought Willie
Anthony
Hutchinson
Yarde.
would beat Buatsi. It was a really good fight on paper beforehand.
And my understanding explicitly, which you might well decry and debunk, is Josh Buatsi categorically wants to fight your brother.
Does he?
That's my understanding.
Categorically.
Yeah, no, that's what he's.
That's what he's told me.
Yeah, of course, that's what he's told you. But again, I say, if the fight was gonna happen, it should happen. And if it didn't happen, there's nothing stopping it now.
Right. Is it the fight you want?
There's nothing. I've been wanting this fight for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think Ant has been wanting this fight for a long time.
So it's the fight you want. It's the fight I want. It's the fight Simon wants. It's the fight both fighters want. So
no, but
Turkey can make it happen.
No, but you keep on saying both fighters like you're in a position to speak for Joshua Buatsi. You're not. I am Anthony Yarde's trainer and manager. I am fully qualified to say my fighter wants to fight. You are not qualified. You are a friend who is speaking to another friend who can lie in your face, Adam, and behind your back do something totally different. I ain't going down that road, but what I'm telling you is that Anthony Yarde is ready to fight Joshua Buatsi. Anthony Yarde is ready to fight Chris Billam-Smith. Anthony Yarde is ready to fight Kovalev if he can find himself back in the mix. Anthony Yarde is ready to fight Dimitri Bivol. Anthony Yarde is ready to fight Beterbiev too. Anthony Yarde is all about fighting.
Okay.
And up until the other week, any chains that were there have now disappeared.
Great. So Yarde's free. I'll tell Buatsi.
And you can tell Frank, you can tell Eddie, you can tell Ben Shalom, you can tell the man himself, Turkey Al-Sheikh. There is nothing stopping AY from fighting. Nothing. And you're not hearing it from a third party or a cousin or a friend that's a friend of a next friend. You're hearing it from the manager. You're hearing it from the trainer, Tunde Ajayi. I'm telling you,
I want AY
we're ready to fight. But unlike other fighters, they haven't got people that can talk for them. I can talk for AY and let AY do what he's supposed to do, which is fight. And this young man has shown for so many years as a fighter that he's ready. No, but everybody got brave in this country thinking that they were going to put on the same performance as AY against Beterbiev. We all saw what happened to Callum Smith. And if Callum Smith wants to fight, bring him as well. I don't know I don't know how long he's going to have a honeymoon for, but we're ready. And you know, we didn't have, up until now, no one's heard us talk. Because at that moment in time, silence was the best medicine. But silence is also powerful, Adam.
I know that.
Silence is also powerful, and there is nothing stopping it. And me and Frank, I'm going to say this, Frank Warren is still to this day my best buddy in boxing. He's a man that gave me opportunities when I never, and there is nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with myself and Frank Warren, but and Frank knows I'm always and have always protected my guy. And that's Anthony Yarde. And I don't care if I'm ready, if I lose a relationship because I care about the fighter that I took from a novice, from training him 2 years before he turned professional and I'm driving to gyms with no money. I'm going to do that.
I love this passion.
Absolutely.
But let's get the fight made.
Absolutely. Well, if they haven't heard it, they've heard it now, and you haven't missed. So Josh Buatsi, I'm sure you've heard this. You're the one that's being potentially alleged for not fancying this fight. Right, anyway, that's it for episode 95 of Talk Boxing. Adam, thank you very much. Tunde, brilliant. Thanks, mate. Good luck. See you again.
Thank you.
And see you guys next time we're out.